What color skin emoji do you use?
If I used one, it would be black.
Why?
Why not? It's so preposterous, all of that. You know, everything that's happened to Rogan, all this idiocy around race, this insistence that we can be reduced to our race, our ethnicity, our sexual identity. It's so appalling and it's so destructive. And one of the reasons that I had a lot of reasons for making my political stance in relationship to Canada's compelled speech laws. I had a lot of reasons for making my views about that known. One of them was the fact that my government had introduced a bill that required me to say things a certain way, which was an unparalleled move in the history of Western democracies and something the Americans had made strictly unconstitutional, I believe in 1942. So that was part of it. Part of it was I knew that this top-down mandated belief that confusion around gender identity was a positive occurrence to provide that freedom, let's say. I knew that for every person that saved, that would doom 1,000 people, primarily girls, to a kind of psychological contagion as confusion about sex and gender identity ramped up. I knew the literature on psychological contagion. It's quite.
What is that? What's psychological
detailed.
Contagion?
You could think about them as psychological epidemics. So the last one of any real size was the satanic daycare scares in the 1980s. Well, you're probably not old enough to remember that, but the longest sentences in U.S. criminal justice history were handed out often to women who were accused of late onset female sexual predation of children in daycare centers. The FBI invented a whole new category of perpetrator, category that didn't exist because there are no late onset female sexual child sexual predators. They don't exist. But there were women who obtained prison sentences of several hundred years for hypothetically being involved in these satanic daycare abuse rituals. And it just swept across the whole country like the Salem witch trials, except at a much larger scale. There's a book called Satan's Silence that was written by a lawyer and a social worker that documents it. It's just unbelievable. There were stories about underground tunnels where children were being taken down and being, well, every possible thing you could think of was happening to them, all in the name of like satanic ritual. It was a contagion. And those things happened. It happened with cutting behaviors. It happened with eating disorders. This is almost all among girls because teenage girls are most prone to this. They called it hysteria back in Freud's time, but there's a book by a man named Henry Ellenberger called Discovery of the Unconscious that traces back psychogenic epidemics to about 300 years. And I knew that, people in adolescence, especially people of a certain personality configuration, have some trouble settling into a stable identity. And for a variety of reasons, it can be high negative emotion, which is associated with low self-esteem. Those are more or less the same thing. And then, in all likelihood, high trait openness, which is the creativity dimension. And the high trait openness people, they're the ones that are more likely to have green hair and red hair and lots of piercings and lots of tattoos and dress in a non-standard manner, let's say. That's all associated with creative behavior. And they have trouble catalyzing a single identity. And then if you throw in categorical confusion, which is exactly what you're doing when you declare that there's, an endless number of gender identities, then people who are prone to identity dissociation and to psychogenic contagion, you're going to demolish them.
There is an obsession.
Abigail Schreier has documented that quite nicely in her book, Irreversible Damage. And it's way more girls than boys. And it's thousands and thousands and thousands of them. So you think, well, perhaps a few people who are transgender benefited from this new reality. But for everyone who's benefited, and I'd like to see the data just showing how much they actually benefited. And that'll take a long time to accrue. There's 1,000 people who've been just demolished by this. So, and then what else on the, well, that's basically that on the political front. I could see all that coming. I talked to the Canadian Senate about it when they put in the legislation. They didn't listen. They just thought racism, bigotry, sexism. It's like, yeah, have it your way. But, so what, all these girls that have rapid onset gender dysphoria and are disfiguring themselves and taking hormones and, wreaking havoc with themselves and their families and the broader culture. These people that were so woke and so permissive, you think they're going to have that on their conscience? They're on to something, some other noble venture.
What's happening, people? If you enjoyed that, then press here for the full, unedited episode. And don't forget to subscribe. Peace.